ministering to the whole person, held at the Civic Center in Baltimore, Maryland, May 1 through 4, 1974. On this cassette, you'll hear the address presented by John Powell, the author of Why Am I Afraid to Love and Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? A Roman Catholic priest and a professor at Loyola University in Chicago, he spoke on the secret of staying in love.
At Anaheim, this Slatem at Anaheim, and by popular request, I'd like to tell it again. But first, I would like to define popular request. Two people asked me to retell this joke. All right? The German airline's going across the Atlantic, and the midway across the air, ping, Achtung, this is the captain. The ship is losing altitude. This is not serious. But 20 minutes later, ping, Achtung, this is the captain again. The ship continues to lose altitude. This is serious. And finally, 20 minutes later, ping, Achtung, this is the captain. The ship has lost so much altitude, we must ditch the ship. Now, these are the instructions for ditching. Those of you that can swim, line up on the right side of the airplane, and those of you that cannot swim, line up on the left side. Now, when we hit the Wasser, those of you that can swim, jump into the Wasser and start swimming for England. And those of you on the left side of the airplane but cannot swim, thank you for flying Lufthansa. That'll loosen me up, all right. When I was a seminarian, and I was a serious seminarian, one of the things that really struck home was that we would all, at the end, be judged by love. And this is what I really heard Jesus saying. By this shall men know that you are my disciples. This is the badge you wear, that you love. And so I was all set to really love, and I worked up a couple of really good sermons about love and the importance of loving. And I was giving those good sermons, really getting a lot of mileage on them and on my mouth. And I got a call. I was teaching in a seminary at the time, and I got a call from a lady who got in the way of one of these sermons. And she said, my husband and I have a 19-year-old daughter who's an alcoholic. Would you talk to her? Now, you know what that means, right? Scare her. Do something. You know, adjust her. You're an adjuster. And so I said, well, yes, sir, I'd be very happy to. So we made a date for Sunday afternoon, and father and mother and little daughter came to the seminary. And the father stormed in and he said, my name is General Bullmoose. That was not his name. I'm concealing his name. You know, you got to conceal some things when you retell stories. My name is General Bullmoose. This is my wife. And this is the kid. And you should have seen the kid. You know, old super skirt. And so I looked at the girl, and, you know, I wanted to say to her, if you feel all right, would you notify your face? She really looked seriously unhappy. By the way, I am a teacher, but I laugh a lot. And so anyway, this man says, do you want to hear her latest? And I said, do you want to announce it right here in the doorway of the seminary? And he said, don't you want to hear her latest? And I said, not from you. Of course, if she would like to tell me, you know, I'd be very happy to hear her latest. So the father and mother were standing there, and I said, well, why don't you two take a walk? I guess the father wanted to be in on the kill. You know, you could tell his blood instinct was up. And so I took the girl into a parlor, and we sat down, and I said, you didn't want to come, did you? And she said, what was your first clue? And I said, my first look at you, honey. That was my first clue. And so, but I thought it was only a question until my Irish charm wore her down. And about 10 minutes later, she said, do you want to hear my latest? And I said, oh, do I want to hear your latest? After the advance billing your father gave it? Sure, I want to hear your latest. So I chugged a bottle of vodka. She said, that means the whole thing? For the sweet and innocent among us, and I think there were one or two, when you chug, you know, you drink the whole thing right down. I said, You chugged a fifth of vodka? And she says, yeah. I said, what happened? She says, how am I supposed to know? I said, you go out? She said, did I go out? They had to get a doctor to revive me. So, anyway, she proceeded to tell me a little bit more about her life. I asked her what else she did for kicks, and it was about equally interesting. And so then she told me, what Bill Glasser said about, you give a person a name, he'll play the game. You tell him he's a crumb, he'll be a crumb. Dig a hole for him, he'll fall into it. And she was feeding that back to me, although I sort of read that in the doorway of the seminary, that her father was doing that to her. So I said to him, by the way, I asked her, could I talk alone to your father? And she said, you're not going to tell him anything, are you? And I, no. So everything's under the seal, it's all right. Under the seal is a Catholic little phrase. As Father Majewski says to Archie Bunker, if you don't get it, Archie, don't worry about it. It's parochial humor. Anyway, I told her she didn't have anything to worry about, and I said to the father, I have a feeling your daughter is drinking because of you. He says, because of me, I don't drink. And I asked him if he ever heard that story about W.C. Fields once saying, I once met a girl in Philadelphia who drove me to drink, and I've been looking for her ever since to thank her. I said, I really think you could drive somebody to drink. He said, look, I'm a good moral man. I said, I know, but sometimes good moral men can be an awful burden. I said, I really think that's why your daughter's drinking. Well, when the daughter got wind of this, she says to me, could I come back and see you? And I said, sure. And, big success. I was at the afterglow of success. And she came back. But the more she came back, the more I realized she was an enormously self-centered little kid who never thought about anybody else, who told the most juvenile. She was just fooling people by walking around in a 19-year-old body. She was about 8. Really emotionally arrested. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. And one day she came in and she said, in her southern Hoosier twang, God damn it, I'll get even with them. And I said, what happened? She said, my mother and father. What happened? Well, it wouldn't let me go to the Rustic. Well, the Rustic in southern Indiana is a very, very bad dive, all right? And the local physician said every Sunday morning I sew up the faces when someone breaks off the bottom of a bottle and twists it in someone else's face. And I said, why do you suppose they wouldn't let you go? She said, I don't know. And I said, well, maybe we could think of a reason. She said, I told you I don't know. And I said, that's why maybe we could think of a reason. So get off it. And I said, well, there are people in the world that are starving to death. I was going to try a big, masterful plan to put things in perspective for her. So I told her about the people in India starving to death, and the people in old people's homes, who don't know where the ball game is at. And I told her about little kids who are dying of cancer, and a lot of sad things like that. And she put her hand on her hip and she said, name 2. And I got to admit, I really saw red, and I said, hey, you know what you need, honey? You need a Copernican revolution. You need to find out that the whole world doesn't really revolve around you. You really do. You need to find out that you revolve around the world. And she said, oh, get off it. You pay your money, you take your choice, honey. But you live in a world that has a population of 1. You really do. And so she grabbed her books. I don't know what she did with books, but she used to carry them when she came to see me, and she stormed out. She was so long, and I said, think about it. And so she left. And about a month later, a psychiatrist, wouldn't you know, a psychiatrist comes to the seminary, and barring present company, he's one of the finest men in that business that I know. And he gave a talk to the seminarians. And after the talk to the seminarians, I was on the faculty, I decided to ply him with the promise of liquor. And I said, would you like a beer? We always kept beer in the infirmary of the seminary for medicinal purposes. If you were low on malt or something. And so he said, yes, he would really enjoy a beer. And I said, well, let's go up to the infirmary. I've got the key to the infirmary kitchen. And so we're up there, and I'm thinking about this girl, and I know I've lost her. I know she's not coming back. And I really think I'm very uneasy about that. So he sat down, and after a couple of beers, I popped the big question. I say, Doctor, how do you teach people to love? And he gives me a look that is sometimes reserved for celibate clergymen. You know, it's kind of a sickly smile, and wait a minute, Doc, don't sit me down on your knee now and give me that little sermon. I'm really interested. How do you teach people to love, to get out of themselves? And he said, well, I would like to ask you why you asked the question. You know, they never give you straight answers. They always ask you why you asked the question. So I told him the same story that I just told you about the girl, and he said, well, I can only say this. I don't think you can teach people to love. I think people have to decide they're going to love. I think it has to be one of those decisive interventions of transactional analysis where you really step in and take charge of your life. You decide. But he said, I do want to say this, Father, that if you really wanted to help her, if you really wanted to facilitate that decision to become a loving person, you did everything wrong. And I said, really? He said, yep. That's my opinion. He said, do you know why people don't love? When you see someone who isn't very loving, do you know why? Fill me in. He said, did you ever have a toothache, Father? I said, oh, yes. He said, whom were you thinking about when you had your toothache? I said, me. Oh, yeah, you. And who else? Dentist. Yes, you and someone who could give you relief, right? Yes, that's right. He said, that's why people don't love. They're in pain. And that little girl that you were telling me about, she's in real pain. She really hurts. And when you're in pain, you can't think about other people. You can't go out of yourself. You can't ask people, what can I do for you? You're always looking around for a dentist, someone who could relieve you of your pain. And he said, when she came in, he said, you know, if you had really been sharp, you would have noticed that, what pain she was in. You would have been able to describe the pain. She hates herself. Her father has stood up in his own cracked, neurotic way and as like a mirror and given her a deformed and ugly image of herself, and she believes that. And people behave the way they think about themselves. You know, he said, you told me, and I told him a number of things I did not tell you. I didn't want to bore you. She chose a bum for a boyfriend because when you fall in love, you don't want to fall in love with someone who is in another world, a saint high up on a pedestal. You could never breathe the air up there. You try to look out and find someone like yourself. That's what she thinks she is. He said, of course she won't go to church, which her parents would like her to do. But he said, I have a feeling it isn't so much that she doesn't really want to relate to God. It's that she feels if she were to walk into a church, God would say to her, what are you doing here, you slut? Because that's what her father says to her. She's in real pain. And he said, and I would also bet that when she chugged that bottle of vodka, it was an occult attempt at suicide. She did not want to wake up. And I have a feeling when consciousness was coming back to her, she was saying, don't wake me up. Don't make me come back. I don't want to come back. Of course, what she didn't want to come back to was herself, was being herself. And she came here to the seminary, and her father wanted to embarrass her in the doorway of the seminary, and you wouldn't let him. You were a buffer that protected her, and she saw you as the dentist. Oh, my God. I think I have found someone who will relieve me of my pain, and he's a priest. A man of the cloth. He's going to tell me that I'm not as bad as my father said I was. I think I have found a dentist. And you were very nice to her that first day. And you told her father you thought that he might be deeply involved with her problem. And she loved you for that. But she really didn't love you because she really can't love. She can't get that far outside of herself. Her own pain is too preoccupying. And all the obnoxious qualities that you saw in her were only attempts to disguise that pain, little security operations that kept her from getting hurt worse. And so she came out. She came out because you were holding hands out to her that said, "You can come to me, it's all right." And she came out. She came out from behind a wall, a security operation that was protective. And when she got out, of course she was herself. She was emotionally retarded. She acted like a child. She thought like a child because of this terrible self-image that she carried around like a cancer inside of her. And you looked at her and said, "Your father was right. Your father was right about you. And I don't like you either." And I said, "Oh, come on, Doc. I didn't say that." He said, "You didn't have to say that, did you?" When you say to someone, "Hey, you know what you need? You need a Copernican revolution. You need to find out that the whole world doesn't really revolve around you. You're living in a world that has a population of one. Do you have to add, 'I don't like you'? Or haven't you said it?" And I said, "Touche. Yeah, you got me. I see it all. It really did strike me." And so I wrote her a love letter, and I'm sure when the final anthology of love letters in the English language are collected, mine will be given an honorary mention. And I said I really wanted her to come back, that I really wanted to talk to her again. And I felt so guilty. I felt like such a failure, and I don't like to be a failure. And so she came back, and she started to tell me the same stupid early adolescent stories again, but this time I just listened. And I really knew something that I didn't know then, that she was in pain. She was like Bruce Larson driving along on his motorcycle, being stung by wasps and giving everybody an ultra-bright smile. I knew she was in pain, and that made it a lot easier. And I knew the reason she couldn't really think of anyone else, because this pain was magnetizing of all her attention. And every time I fail to love myself, and every time I see others that I suspect are failing to be very loving, I always remember the question in the infirmary that night: "Did you ever have a toothache?" And it's really changed my life. It's really changed my life. It prevents me, or at least it tends to prevent me from being judgmental, from being self-righteous. It makes me a much more compassionate person, because I now believe that every obnoxious quality, whether a person's a braggart or a liar or whatever he is really in its unexposed roots a cry of pain: "Will you help me?" The doctor asked me, by the way, one of the embarrassing questions. He said, "Did you think she loved you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. I'm given to modesty. No, actually, I have no temptations to pride, but God knows I have reason to be, huh?" That was a joke. Honest. Yeah, I thought she liked me, but he said, "Oh, no, she's not capable of really liking. She hurts too much." And so I began to see why this is kind of a loveless world. It isn't that people don't want to love. I think, along with people like Viktor Frankl, that there is in the spirit of man, in the spiritual subconscious of man, a real need to love, to transcend himself, to go out. But it's only when he hurts too much that he doesn't. It's only when he's got something like a toothache, but no one ever jumps out of a window because of a toothache. But suicide is the second highest killer in the college age bracket. I began to realize then, in the laboratory of life, that when people don't love, because they hurt. And they need someone to be a kind of a poultice, to love them even when they can't love themselves, to really believe in them, to really care about them, until they learn slowly to care about themselves. But someone who has been fed a bad image, nourished on an ugly image of himself for 18, 19 years, is not going to respond too quickly. You have to be patient and really capable of love yourself. And I really believe that love is a gift of God. I agree with Paul in the 13th chapter of Corinthians. It is the gift of the Spirit. And I believe without this gift, there is no real love. My little theological prejudice, all right? And so I ask God every day to make me a loving person for all the people who hurt. That I won't inflict my pain on them, and I won't keep my pain from going out. Just as Jesus hanging on the cross in all that physical agony, with the face of his Father kind of blurred from the vision of his mind, saying, Father, pleading for them, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. I turn green with envy when I think of Jesus on the cross, loving out of himself in spite of all that pain, and I want to become that kind of a person myself, a man for others. And when I think about why love doesn't work, why do people who profess to love each other, who enter into a decision and a commitment to love each other, and that's how I would define love. It is a decision and a commitment. I would really like to see, although love, affection is an emotion, I would really like to see love taken out and put in the area of the mind and the will, a decision of the mind and a commitment of the will to love. Just as I once said to Jesus when I was ordained a priest, we lie in the sanctuary of the altar, if you've ever seen an ordination, in a long white gown called an alb, and you lie down. And that prostration is symbolic of the fact that I'm dying to myself. When the bishop asks me to stand up and step forth, Jesus, from this moment on, I now bear your person. And I'm dying to my own selfishness, my own self-interest. I want to live for you. As Paul says in Romans, when you're down in that water of baptism, you die the death to sin and to selfishness, but you rise alive with the life of Christ. That's what I want to do. I'm committed. I'm your man, Jesus. I'm your man. And even though there are some days I sit on the edge of my bed when I'm getting up and I say, Jesus, I don't feel like being a priest today. A priest is a public utility, a town pump that everybody gets to use. And they don't even have to say thank you because that's what you're there for, right? And I don't feel like being a priest. But, oh, Jesus, I will. Because I'm committed to you. I once said to you, I'm your man. I haven't always honored that commitment. I haven't loved as much as I want to. But I am your man. You have me, and you can count on me. I'm your man. But I want to tell you how I feel, because I think that's important, too. That I be honest with you. Why do decisions and commitments fail? Well, why is love so often, in the end, a very bitter thing? Now, this is where, again, I would like to kind of enter an opposite viewpoint of other viewpoints expressed tonight. And I'd like to do it very seriously. It is my opinion that the commitment of love, the decision that I am your man, I am your woman, I am for you. I have said this to you, I promise this to you. I give you my word. In the movie Butterflies Are Free, if you remember, the blind boy says to the little nymphet, Goldie Hawn, when she's about to leave him, so why are you leaving? She said, because you're blind. You're a cripple. Oh, he said, no. No, he said, I'm not a cripple. I am sightless, but I'm not a cripple because I can love. You're a cripple. You're a cripple because you can't be committed. You're afraid to be committed. You're afraid to wager your life. You're the cripple. I'm only sightless. And I think that this is what love is. When someone else's security and happiness and well-being is as real or more real to you than your own. And you say, I'm yours, and you mean it. And you honor that. Whether your emotions support you or not, you honor that. You value that. Then you love. Then you know what it is to love. But I really believe that in human relationships, the reason that love so often caves in and that this decision and commitment becomes a bitter thing is because of the absence of sharing at the feeling level. Because I believe that when you tell someone how you feel, you individuate yourself. When you give out ideas, you really don't individuate yourself because I'm sure other people share your ideas. You may be one of those seminal thinkers that comes along every so often that has a really original idea, but very few people do. When you tell me what you think, when you tell me you're against war, when you tell me that you would like to see more concern, oh yes, I would too. I'm for that. I'm for more laughter. I'm for all those things that you are. But when you tell me how you feel and you describe your feelings to me, nobody else has ever felt like you do. Nobody else. Your feelings are as individuating as your fingerprints and the sound of your voice, color of your eyes. This is when you tell a person who you really are, when you can say how you feel. If you notice, when people are talking, if they're giving out ideas, you can easily get bored. Your mind wanders. But watch when people tell you how they feel. Immediately there's a new interest because they're telling you who they are. Now, it's true that, of course, your emotions can be exhausted as your mind can. But that's when you really tune into people. And I think if you know some people and you've known them for years and you say, but I really don't know them, I would like to ask you to just kind of check back through the record. Is that the kind of person who doesn't tell you how he feels? This is my opinion. Now, I feel very strongly about this. I'm saying it strongly because I feel very strongly about this. I really value the preeminence of the mind and the will as far as decision-making and commitment is concerned. You don't let your emotions make your decisions. But I'm sure that very often the structure of love fails because there is no communication at this level. And I had a box seat at such a failure in my life, my mother and father. My father's dead for 10 years. My mother is now in an old people's home in Chicago. And I go out to visit my father's grave, and I see his name carved there with his 2 dates. And I see my mother's name carved next to it with 1 date. And I always imagine that if an angel were to come and write an epitaph on that tombstone, he would write, "Here lie two good and decent people who never knew each other." Because I think that's what they were. I think they never knew each other because they kept all the wealth of that world of feelings that was inside of them, they kept them squelched. They kept them hidden. And although they never considered divorce, they never really loved each other that much either. But the final emotional rupture took place when my mother came home one night, and I was in 8th grade, 12, 13 years old, and she said, "Oh, I have some good news. The Board of Education is taking me on as a teacher. And they're going to start me out," and she named the salary, which was approximately twice as much as my father was making selling shoes. My father felt humbled selling shoes. His brother was a lawyer. His sister taught literature at Northwestern in Evanston. My mother's brother was a union president. Even the man next door made it big, vice president of the Liggett Drug Corporation. My father sells shoes. And when she said to him, "I'm going to be started out at this salary," he just said mutely, "Don't take it." And she looked startled and she said, "Why not?" "Just don't take it." And she said, "Why not? On what you're making, we can't even have the roof repaired. We could never buy a new car. We couldn't send the kids to college on what you're making." There must have been a knife that was being twisted into his already stigmatized soul that was just eaten away with the feeling of failure on what you're making. He said, don't take it.
This address?
But he never told her how he felt. He never told her that he felt like he was a failure. He never told her how he felt that his father had put money away for him to go to medical school, but he thought he could make it on personality. He goofed off. He blew it. He sold shoes. And everybody else around him made it. We used to have to rent a tuxedo to go to testimonial dinners for my uncles. I always felt very uncomfortable. But all he could say was, don't take it, don't take it. And all she said was, why not, why not? Two good and decent people who never knew each other. He couldn't tell her about his sense of failure. He couldn't tell about her inner agony. And she couldn't tell him what it was like to assume the financial responsibility and to twist and turn at night wondering, how do you support a family of 3 children and $30 a week? All she said was, why not? And so, they stayed in the same house. He left her bedroom. He had built his own little hermitage. And he asked her things like, when is dinner ready? Did he get some beer in? He never said anything nice. All he said was, don't take it. And she took it. And he never forgot that. And when he died, he was lingering. And I happened to be in Rome at the time, and I flew home. And I stayed with him. And he was bitter and hurt and crushed to the end of his life. And then one day, he sat up. And perhaps this is to be explained biologically. He sat up and his eyes widened as though he saw something that was very awesome, that neither made him happy nor sad, but awesome. I knew he was dying. And I braced my hand against the back of his neck and lowered him in the pillow and closed his eyes. And I said to my mother, Mom, he's dead. Dad is dead now, Mother. And she looked up and she said something that astounded me. I have no idea why she said this. The first word she said when I told her that my father had died, the first words were, he loved you so much. He was so proud of you. And I remember it felt like the jolt of a heart attack. I felt something explode in my chest. And I stood there thinking, I'm afraid I'm going to know my father better in death than I knew him in life. And I said, Mom, I better go get a doctor to verify death. And I went out and I got a doctor and a nurse, and they came in and they were examining the corpse, and I was standing against a wall. And the nurse came in and she tried to put her arm around me to console me. And I was crying, and I couldn't tell her what I wanted to. Because what I really wanted to tell her was, hey, I'm not crying because my father's dead. I'm crying because my father never told me he loved me. My father never told me he was proud of me. I never knew my father. And I never told him I loved him. That's why I'm crying. Someone here from Buffalo that I was talking to mentioned that they knew Father Cusimano. And maybe Frank has told you this story. He's a Jesuit from Buffalo. He went off through the Jesuit training program with another young man, and they were the closest of friends. The other was always there when needed. And one day, some people came into the Jesuit residence, and they told Father Cusimano, your friend has been hit by a car. He's lying dead out in the street. And Father Cusimano tells the story himself that he went out and he cradled the dead man's head in the crook of his arms, and he said to him, in spite of the cordon of onlookers, he said to him, you can't die. Don't die. I never told you I loved you. Two good and decent people who never shared at this deeper level of affection and feeling. I never told you I loved you. To me, this is terribly important because I think people don't do this. They simply don't share at that feeling level where the problem really is. The course of your life is shaped by your mind and your will, by your commitments. But oh, those feelings, if you really want to know me, I've got to tell you how I feel. I've got to tell you that what you see up here isn't what's really going on inside me. I've got to tell you, as some of the members of our staff have really affected me by taking what Marty calls inside the jacket of Keith's latest book, a high-risk procedure to open up your feelings. Good and decent people who don't really know each other. This is what I think, that you get to know a person when he's willing to open up his feelings to you. And that love caves in because there is no sharing at this level. On the way home from the hospital, I'm driving my mother home from the hospital on the day my father died, and she said to me, "Do you know, if your father had been a loving man, I think I would be insane with grief." And I remember my hands tightening around the steering wheel, wanting to scream at her, although not in anger, just in frustration at two good and decent people who never knew each other. I wanted to scream, "Oh, he was a loving man. We never knew him. Don't you understand? We never knew him." And the doctors were running a general physical on him. He died of a cerebral thrombosis, but when they x-rayed his stomach, they said to us, "Did you know your father, your husband, had an ulcer?" And we all looked at each other with that same dumb look. And I wanted to say, just another pain in his gut that we never knew. We never knew about. We never really knew him. Oh, he was a loving man. We never knew him. And you know, when I got home and we were going through my father's effects, he used to subscribe to Reader's Digest. And he would sit up in that little hermitage of his, and he would write comments in the margins on every article he read. "This is a lot of bull. Pay no attention to this man." And he would write other things. "This is good." And I said, could I take those copies of the old Reader's Digest back to the seminary with me? And they all laughed at me. My family laughed at me. They said, "What do you want to take them back for? They're so old." And I just want them. I want to read what Dad wrote. I wanted to know him, and he was gone. And I did. I read through every comment he wrote in the margins because I really wanted to know my father. My father, who said, "Don't take it," and a few other things like that. I think this is very important. And I really am very happy to think that when my mother dies, it will not be a repetition of the same thing, because about 5 years ago, the doctors told us that they were 95% certain that she had an inoperable cancer of the liver. And we were all set to brace for the impact of this struggle of the inch-by-inch death by cancer. And as you probably know, in the Roman Catholic Church, we have a sacrament of penance, sometimes called confession. And my mother, being severely arthritic all the days of her later years of her life, I used to hear her confession. It was always very angelic, and it always ended with a formula she learned as a little girl. Would I give her God's absolution if you think me worthy? And I used to always want to say, "Mom, I'm not worthy to tie your shoelaces." At any rate, the night before the exploratory surgery that was to uncover an inoperable cancer of the liver, I was with her in the hospital, and I said, "Do you want to go to confession?" "Oh, yes, I do." And she made everybody leave. She'd give me 5 minutes to prepare, come back. I went back, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and you've got to assume, a kind of formal position for confession. You put your face down in your hand, and you look very Pentecostal. So I was busy looking very, very deep and profound, and she made her confession of her life. And I could hear the angels singing all over the place. And when she finished, I said, Mother, a priest is a mediator. That's his essential role. It's your role, too, We're all priests. We're all baptized into Christ Jesus, our high priest. A priest is a mediator. He's supposed to bring the world to God and God to the world. He's got to be in deep touch. If he's really going to be a priest, he's got to be in deep touch with the heart of man. He's got to really know the heart of man and bleed with the heart of man. But he's also got to be in deep touch with the heart of God, because if he ever loses either connection, he's not a priest. Mother, I'm bringing God in this moment of your life. I'm bringing him your remorse. And I'm bringing you his forgiveness. But I also want to bring you what I think he would say to you. I think he would say, thank you. You've been great. Mother, I said, I remember all the sandwiches you wrapped in wax paper. I remember the nights you sat up when we had bad colds and couldn't breathe, and you sat up all night with us. I remember the time I swallowed the hot ice over in the park that the ice cream man gave me, and I was putting it in my mouth trying to play as though I was smoking. And I swallowed it, and I thought I was going to die. I thought it would certainly burn a hole right through me and come out my feet. And I remember when I came home and you flooded my stomach with milk, and then you took me in your arms on the rocker on the front porch. And you know what I thought, Mother? I never told you this. You know what I thought? I can't die. I can't die because my mother loves me too much. It would break her heart if I ever died. Mother, I remember thinking that thought. And I want to thank you. You were great. And she listened, because the only time I'm not her baby, I'm the last of her children. And then there's something about her face and her voice that always says, baby, my baby. Except when I'm her father, when I'm her priest. Then that whole visage changes. And she says, yes, Father. And so she's listening to me very politely while I'm telling her how great she is. And then I give her the final absolution and blessing. And now she becomes Mama again. And now I become baby again. And she reaches out. I'm still sitting in my Pentecostal position. And she reaches out and she takes my head and she puts it down on her shoulder very tenderly. She cradles my head on her shoulder. I can feel her cheek against mine. And she says in my ear, don't be sad now. Don't be sad for me. If it isn't tomorrow morning, it'll be some other morning. And if it isn't this year, it'll be some other year. And Daddy's waiting for me. I can't keep him waiting too long. But I want you to know, honey, that I gave you up. I gave you up to do something good and noble. I gave you up to be a priest. And I was so happy to be able to give you to that. I felt like a mother bird kicking the little fledgling out of the nest and saying, go sing your song to the world. I was so happy. Don't be sad now. If you leave your mind or your heart back in this hospital room, it'll take you away from the people I gave you up to serve. Don't be sad. You're a good boy, and I love you, but don't be sad now. If it isn't tomorrow morning, it'll be some other morning. And if it isn't this year, it'll be some other year. Don't be sad for me. You've got work to do. I started to cry like a geyser, and I walked out into the corridor, and my stiff upper lip family goes, oh, God, the kid broke down, you know? My brother especially was very scandalized by my weakness. And I wanted to say it all. I always want to talk at the moments when I'm crying hardest. I wanted to say, but I couldn't. Hey, I'm not crying for sadness. I'm crying because I just got to know our mother. I did. She took my head on her shoulder and told me who she really is. She tips her down when you're standing under the death sentence. When tomorrow morning may be the morning. You don't bother with your games. She showed me her heart. It's beautiful. So anyway, nobody would listen to me. I couldn't say it anyway, so I went off in the linen room of the hospital, just stood there and cried out of sheer joy. It turned out that the trouble was not cancer. surgeon came out and he told us she's in intensive care, but it was a stone from her gallbladder that blocked the duct that leaves the liver, something like this, and gave us some false readings, but we repaired it. We all went down to intensive care, and she's lying there. She's just in kind of a limbo of consciousness, and I'm whispering in her ear, "You're all right. You're going to be all right." And she's going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And my sister tried to brush her hair. Her hair had been matted down on her forehead. And she said, "Stop pulling my hair, Rita. Rita, you're pulling my hair." And then she looked up, and she only had one eye open, and that eye looked awfully glassy. And she said to me, "Where's the TV down here? Don't they have a TV in intensive care?" And she couldn't have seen one if there had been one there. And I remember standing there smiling and saying, "Go ahead and bitch, old girl. Go ahead. Come on." Because last night, I got to know you. And I'm not going to have to read through volumes of Reader's Digest. You told me you loved me. You told me how you felt about me. You told me how you felt about what I'm doing. You asked me not to be sad for you. You were great. No matter what you do from now on, I'll always know you. I won't hang my head and know you better in death than in life. Too late have I loved you. Too late. The final illustrative story I'd like to tell you is that a man and a woman that I one time tried to help who were married were on the verge of divorce. The man had a fetish. He was compulsively attracted to steal women's underclothing. It really isn't funny now, because he so feared rejection by a person of the opposite sex, he had to pick out an object, a brassiere or a pair of panties, because they can't say "get lost," they can't laugh at you. And he used to steal these things. And one night the police came to his home and they rang the bell and they said to his wife, who answered.
This is cassette number 10 in the 17-tape series featuring highlights of the Festival of Hope Conference on Ministering to the Whole Person, held at the Civic Center in Baltimore, Maryland, May 1 through 4, 1974. On this cassette, you'll hear the workshop session led by John Powell on the subject, Experiments in Knowing and Being Known.
The first thing I would like to say is that I feel like Sophia Loren's baby. They claim that right after birth, when Sophia Loren's baby was brought in to be nursed, he looked at his mother and said, "Is all this for me?" That story may be apocryphal. At any rate, when I saw all these people in here, that's how I felt. Why aren't you with Tom and Amy? Anyway, what I want to talk about is communication. I'm sure that the talk tonight, The Secret of Staying in Love, it's not a well-kept secret. Everybody seems to know it. The secret is communication. And in a basic sense, communication means to have something in common with another person. You communicate, you share, and in communication, what you share is yourself. So that's what we'll be talking about tonight, and this will be kind of an approach to the practical aspect. How do you do it? How do you share yourself with someone? As I was walking in here, I'm not sure this lady came into this particular workshop, but she said, one of the things in your book, Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am, that I have really found to be true, unless you share yourself totally with someone, at least one person in this world, you really can never reach the full development of the human perfection of which you are capable, and I'm sure of that too. Now, the second presumption of mine is that the way you really share yourself is by sharing your feelings. Sharing ideas. Have you noticed that someone like Keith Miller, who is willing to bleed in public, he's willing to let you see the color of his blood. You know, I first met him for the very first time in Anaheim at our first Festival of Hope, and I came back, and honestly, for me, the peak experience was Keith Miller, because the man lets you see his feelings. If you notice, Martin Marty wrote in the jacket of his latest book, I think it's inside the Becomers, that Keith Miller takes a high-risk procedure in writing about himself and exposing himself. But I think that's the only way that you ever really let anyone get to know you and you get to know someone else, when you're willing to talk about your feelings and talk about them without reservation, to open them up. And some of your feelings are embarrassing, and some of your feelings can be used against you. But it's only when you're ready to take that high-risk procedure in life that you're going to find any satisfaction in love. And you're nobody till somebody loves you. And unless you're willing to open yourself up and be known this way, who can love you? People can feel sorry for you. They can love you with that general Christian love, but they can never love you deeply in an interpersonal sense because they will never know you. Now, some people say, as a matter of fact, it's very often said, people don't want to know your feelings. Nobody's interested. Every time I try to tell someone about my feelings, they give me the put-off signs. And I want to say to them, hey, you know what? You're not doing it right. If people seem to be uninterested in you, you're doing something wrong. Because we all want to know one another. And I would like to suggest that there are three possible motives for sharing yourself at this feeling, at this gut level, the level where you really live, the level that's really you. I don't want to insult you, but you and I have never had an original idea in our lives. Everything we have is stolen, is reworded. But our feelings, you've never had an emotion that isn't individual. You've never had an emotion, a feeling that isn't just pure you. That nobody will ever have a feeling like that again. But your thoughts? No. When you share your thoughts, you could be reading out of a book. When you share your feelings, now you're sharing yourself. And there are three motives. This is what I want to say. If people don't seem to be interested in your feelings, ask yourself this question: why are you opening yourself up? Why? Now, the first possibility is called ventilation. I've got to tell you how I feel because I've got to get it off my chest. I've got to let someone know how I feel. After all I'm going through, and I need someone to talk to. That's ventilation. People don't really like to be ventilated upon. That was not a euphemism, really, although it could be construed that way. People don't want to be made a garbage dump, and you're saying, I can't keep this inside of me, so I'm going to pour it out on you. And sometimes people with great compassion and who are rather unmarked themselves, they'll sit and listen. They'll say, okay, I'll be your crying towel. And occasionally you and I need to do that. We need to go to someone and say, I've got to bend your ear. But when we're talking about communication in a relationship, if that's your motive, you're only talking to me so you can feel better. And if you analyze that act, it's an extremely selfish act. It's not a loving act. And that there's a song, all the world loves a lover. And until you learn to love, until you want to say to people, I'm going to share myself with you because I want to love you. I want to love you. I want to share myself with you. I want to give you all that I have, which is me. And I can only give you all that I have when I open up to you my feelings, when I take that high-risk procedure in opening myself up to you. But if I do it just so I can feel better, well, that's really an exercise in selfishness. It really is. And if it's often repeated, the selfish act becomes a selfish habit. And you begin to use people. Everybody becomes your little emotional sounding board. And I would like to suggest, if your experience has been that people are not interested in you and in your emotions, would you just do a little double check? Why were you telling that other person your emotions? Was it so that you could feel better? The second possibility in the motivation of sharing one's feelings is manipulation. I tell you my emotions in such a way that I am sending out a coded signal to you that I want you to do something about my emotions. And I notice this in counseling. When a person comes in and says, Father, there's something I'd like to talk over with you. I have a problem, and I've got to somehow solve this problem, and I'd like to kind of pick your brains. And then I feel like a library, a kind of a resource. You can come, and I'll give you my books, but you write your own term paper. I'm not going to do that for you. I have a strong messianic impulse, a great complex, you know. It makes you feel better. And someone one day said to me, you know, if you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he can eat for life. If you solve a person's problems for him, he's all right for that day, but he's got to come back to you next time he has a problem. But if you teach him to grow his own muscles and solve his own problems, then he's all right for life. So as soon as I heard that and it went touche inside of me, I decided to give up, you know, the decisive intervention of transactional analysis. I decided to give up my messianic status and complex. I sublet my apartment on Mount Olympus and came down with everybody else. When people come in and they're asking you, will you solve my problem? We immediately don't want that. And I found myself in the counseling situation really uneasy. Really uneasy because I don't want to be responsible for your problems. I'm having a terrible time being responsible for my own problems, for my own decisions, for my own self. I want to know you. I want to share you. But I don't want you to double my problems. And especially, I don't want you to drop your agony in my lap to be solved. So the second possibility, when you open yourself up in the only kind of communication that produces love, the communication of your feelings, the second possibility I ask you to examine yourself is, are you really manipulating the other person? If I come to you and I say, I'm having a problem with loneliness. I feel lonely a great deal of the time. One of the people on the staff here was in our little small group meeting upstairs said this. A person that I was very surprised. We feel very lonely. I have very few close friends. By the way, most of the staff agreed. They had very few close friends. But nobody was saying to me, you be my friend as a result of my loneliness. You've got to come and fill this vacuum, this void inside me. If they did say that, if they tried to make me responsible for their loneliness, I think I would have wanted to get on my bicycle and pedal away. I can't be responsible for your problems. So that, but I want to know you. But I can't be responsible for you. So I ask you to consider, please, the possibility of ventilation. You're getting rid of your garbage. Your emotional steam has to pour out and drench someone else. And the possibility of manipulation, because if you try either of these motives, if you're operating on them, people will know. People will know, and they will seem unwilling to listen. They'll be distracted from you. They'll turn away, and then you say, people aren't interested. They're not interested in knowing me. Oh, I think they are. They're not interested in taking over your life. They're not interested in being your family garbage can, but they're interested in knowing you. And that's the third possibility, the possibility of communication. I want to share myself with you. I want to have me in common with you to communicate. And really, you know, this is the greatest gift you can give someone else, is the gift of yourself. I thought it was a cute line. I'm not sure whether I thought of it myself or I stole it. You know, they say if you steal one thing from one man, that's called plagiarism. You steal many things from many people without acknowledging it, that's called research. And I said, well, I'm a researcher, you know. But what love demands is presence, spelled E-N-C-E, not presence, E-N-T-S. You don't give anything until you give yourself. And you know, you can tell people who are willing to give themselves. You feel close to them. And other people, you can live under the same roof with them for years and still say, I don't know who you are. Because they never really open up their feelings to share themselves with you. It's much easier to talk about a problem than it is to relate to a person. It's much easier to talk about a decision you're going to make or to criticize than it is to open up those feelings that are inside all of us. Now, so that's the first thought I would like to suggest to you, that if people seem to turn you off, if they don't seem to want to know you, ask whether you're ventilating, manipulating, or communicating. And really ask yourself in a moment of truth. When you say to someone, I'm lonely, are you really saying indirectly, now do something about my loneliness? Please console me. Please be my friend. I need a friend. I need someone like you. Ask yourself. Are you getting it off your chest? You're saying all this so you can feel better? People are not interested. And these are ultimately very selfish acts, and you will become, if you perform enough of them, a very selfish person. If you really want to share yourself in love, I want you to know me, and I know it's a risk, but I want you to know me. I do. Then you will be very happy to know me. That's why I think someone who is speaking to a whole group, I don't put any direct pressure on any one of you. And I say, if I tell you about my loneliness up here, or my sorrow, or my difficulty accepting myself, you can all listen to that very eagerly because you don't have to do anything about it. I'm just sharing myself with you, trying to love you by the gift, the only real gift I have to give you, which is me. And you got to ask yourself, will you give your gift? Now, obviously, because love has so many failures, if this kind of sharing, if this sharing at gut level were done, love just grows deep roots. It really does. Something must go wrong because love fails so often. There are more and more divorces, more and more failures in communication between parents and children. Somewhere, love dies. And I would like to suggest that the reason it dies, one of the reasons it dies, is that people are unwilling to share at this level. Tonight in the talk that I'm giving, I'm going to tell you about my mother and father. And what an agony of remembrance that is. Augustine was right. Memory is indeed a sad privilege. Two good and decent people who never knew each other. And I have this feeling about most of the people I know. That if they will not share themselves at this deeper level of feeling, they will never know each other, and if they never know each other, they can never love each other. All right? Why don't we open up our emotions? Now, I would like to distinguish between two things. One is the non-expression of our feelings, and the other is the repression of our feelings, and they mean two different things. And if it's cold to Newcastle for you, be patient for a minute. In psychological repression, I bury my true emotions. I deny them. I won't admit them to myself. I don't even know I have them. And they become headaches and ulcers and asthma and allergies and fallen arches and things like this. But I'm not mad. No, I'm not. And I really think I'm not. Or I'm not afraid. Who's afraid? What have I got to be afraid of? That's called repression. If you can imagine your mind, although Tom Harris says he prefers unawareness to unconscious, if you can imagine your mind as kind of the upstairs and downstairs, it's divided in a split-level mind, you know. Things that you don't want upstairs because they're eyesores, you can put down in the basement of your mind where you will no longer be aware of them. Like a sliver that you push under the flesh, you can no longer see it, be frightened by it, but it will continue to fester inside you and to hurt. I think most human suffering is from repressed emotions. I think this is what all the speakers have been implying is, and that's why we don't really know our true problems. That's why people spend years in psychotherapy trying to have this dredged up, what is really bothering me? But I won't admit it. I won't admit it even to myself. That's repression, right? Now, non-expression is when I know what I'm feeling, but I'm not going to tell you. It's Bruce Larson riding along on his motorcycle, and the wasp is stinging him, and he's smiling at all the motorists. And you and I can go through life, and we know we're hurting inside, we know we're lonely, but we never let our mouths say that. Now, okay, now the reasons for first non-expression is that I fear you won't understand. You won't accept this emotion. Now, this is a true fact about me that is very embarrassing for me to admit. That part of my identity, part of where I get my strokes and feedback is by being a ladies' man. Now, try that on your zither. A priest, a celibate priest, and he's got this thing about being a ladies' man. And I say, yeah, isn't that terrible? But it's true. Now, I am firmly convinced that there's no such thing as a bad or good emotion. If female adulation makes me feel good, 3, 2, 1, suffer, baby. You know? There's nothing I can do about it. That's an emotion. If I begin to manipulate ladies so that they will give me their adulation, then that I'm responsible for that. If I lead someone on, or I have a few well-placed winks and little squeezes of the hand, then I'm sending out my coded signals, you know? Adulate, baby, adulate. I'm responsible for what I do with my emotions, but not for the emotions themselves. And if I took you back into my programming, I had older sisters and cousins, and all they ever talked about was cute boys. Isn't he cute? And they had scrapbooks. I figured the best thing you do in the world was be cute. But anyway, I don't mean to even excuse myself with this was my emotion. If you don't like me, as I say, 3, 2, 1, suffer. I can't do much about it. Even if you don't understand, I've got to tell you that. A second emotion I have is that when I'm speaking, I demand emotionally now. This is my stomach speaking to you. My homegrown Milwaukee tumor. When I'm speaking to you, I demand adoring attention. I do, really. Remember, it's my stomach speaking, all right? I really do. If someone seems distracted or shakes his watch and listens, how could you? When my students sometimes, and I always find out when two heads go together in class and they're whispering, and I throw chalk at them and I say, what are you talking about? And they say, he didn't hear your last sentence. He wanted to get it down in his notes. And so I blushed a little and go on. But it always bothers me that they aren't paying enough attention to me. Okay? Now, again, I think the reason for my emotion, the reason's not important. A lot of people get so busy analyzing their emotions that they don't even have them. You can turn intellectual too soon. You can say, well, why did I feel that way? Before you ever really have the full feeling. Now, I've had that feeling so often that I know it. You better pay adoring, hang on every word, honey. That's my stomach speaking to you, right? My head says, oh, you might be tired. You might be deaf. But make it look good, my stomach says. Look like you're listening, right? Now, I think the reason for that emotion is that although I portray a great deal of self-confidence, at least if I don't come across to you that way, don't bother telling me. I think I do. But I'm really very underconfident. I have learned to compensate for an enormous shyness. I've gotten my kindergarten teacher, while she's still alive, to testify that I am the most painfully shy child she ever taught. And that little kid is still inside of me, blinking, is all this for me? Are you really listening? Now, I am also programmed to be a big success. My mother said, John, she never said these words. Oh, I shouldn't say she said. I should say I heard. You can never tell someone what he said. You can only say what I heard. This is what I heard. John, if you love your mother and you really want to please her, be a big success. You can't be Avis, honey. You got to be Hertz. Numero uno, huh? And so when I'm speaking to someone, this little underconfident kid is looking out and he's saying, how am I doing? And if you're going, you see, it's this lack of oxygen. It's a hellish lack of oxygen. You're not listening to me. And my stomach really gets mad. But you know the reason for that is, what that is? You're sending out a signal to me. And if you're saying, yes, I'm saying, I'm succeeding. Mama, where are you? Isn't that wonderful? I'm succeeding. We made it, baby. Please don't write me fan letters. Now, why did I say that? No, that may be a superfluous request, but occasionally I want to tell you I do get letters that are a little gushy, and I never, ever believe them. But I always want emotionally to mail them to my mother. And now I just tell people, this is my mother's address. Avoid the middleman. Go right to Mommy. Because I really want to succeed, And when Bruce and Keith and these other open people around here admit they feel the same way, I think, I bet I could tell them my emotional reactions. And they would understand. So that non-expression is always like putting your little toe into the water and feeling that it's too cold. You sound people out, you watch them, and you say, would you accept my emotions, these nutty ones? The ones that propel me to be a ladies' man and that demand adoring attention? Huh? Would you take me that way? Now, the first thing I'm going to do when I contact you is look at your fingernails to see if there's any dried blood under them. Someone else's. Because if there is, if I detect that you're rather harsh in your judgments of people, I've heard you say to people, you have no right to feel that way with your little hand on your pert little hip. Boy, by God, baby, you're not going to find out about my emotions. There ain't going to be any of my blood under your fingernails. So I go back into non-expression, and this is the death knell for love. As soon as you go back inside yourself, as soon as you say, no, I will not share my feelings, that's the end. It's the end of knowledge, it's the end of love. The beginning of the end, at least. The reasons for repression. Now, this is a little trickier. Non-expression, you've got the emotion, but you're not going to share it because the water's too cold. The temperature. Karen Horney says that one of the needed things in an atmosphere of sharing is warmth. And baby, if you aren't warm, I'm not going to take out my tender, warm emotions and show them to you. You put your icy hands on them and squeeze them and hurt me. So I won't tell you. With repression, it's a little more subtle. What Tom Harris said this morning about no such thing as a happy childhood, because that parent in you is educating your emotions. He's telling you, by programming you, that you can't feel that way. And I grew up, and this is my daddy telling me this, you're not afraid of that bully in the schoolyard, are you? And I was scared stiff at the beginning, and then I would say to him, no, Daddy, I'm not afraid of him. All right, any man, I always thought virility and fearlessness had to go together as an inseparable combination. And if I ever admitted fear, it was psychological castration for me. If I ever admitted I was afraid. And you know, this is really interesting. All of my teenage, adolescence, and adult life, until kind of recently, I've never been able to admit fear. But when an emotion is repressed, it usually results in a psychosomatic symptom. And you know what? My big mouth, on which I have a lot of mileage, my big mouth always said, I'm not afraid. No. But you know what? My stomach didn't know it. And if the people who put out Rolaids make it big, I want you to know they couldn't have done it without me. Because I ate so many Rolaids trying to assure myself and everybody else, I'm not afraid, no. But I noticed my digestion was off, my sleep was off, because I had to hold all these emotions down. Also, anger. I had to hold down anger, because anger wasn't Christian. And especially if you want to be a sweet little priest. And especially if you've read Carl Rogers and he says, you know what people really need? Yes, You just say to people. That's all they need. Just And I was in and I wanted to say, you bore me. But I never said that. I always said because somehow the marrow of my bones got ordained. And I really wanted to be what I should be, and instead of letting my emotions tell me what they really were, I was always telling them what they should be. And the ones I didn't like, I edited. I edited and pushed them down in my guts, and Rolaids took care of them from there. So that the first thing is your programming. Now, if you go over your emotions, and for my students in school, I made a list of 250 emotions, different emotions. I'm sure it's a name game, but, you know, they alphabetize them too. And they went from accepted to zesty. But how do you feel? Now, there are some emotions you can feel, and there are other emotions you can't. Maybe you can admit fear, but can you be tender? Can you feel tender? Can you feel warm? Can you feel these things? Can you really enjoy intimacy? Can you be afraid? Can you be angry? I don't know. You've got your problems, I've got mine. But you've got to kind of go over the scales and see whether the whole piano is playing for you, or whether some of the keys are dead, because you deaden them by your programming. Huh? So the first thing you've got to do in repression is get over the fact that some emotions are good and some are bad. And at this point, by the way, this is a 30-second pause because I forgot to bring it with me, but I have a manila folder over here. Would you bring it to me? It's on the table, a manila folder. I was saying this to I guess it was at the Anaheim Convention, and a pastor from Nebraska and his flock who were at the Anaheim Festival, thank you very much, wrote out a creed of emotions. And I'd like to read it to you. Oh, pardon me, it wasn't from the Anaheim. He said, here it is. It was during a group study of the book, Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? This is what they wrote. I believe that God created me with the capacity to experience a whole galaxy of feelings. That the emotion I have at any given moment is a tribute to the God who gave me such wonderful capacities to feel. And that I will know who I am and become more and more who He made me to be only when I accept and report my true feelings to Him and to others. I believe that Jesus experienced the same range of emotions that are a part of me. That He faithfully avoided repression and unhealthy suppression. That He unashamedly accepted Himself as a person with deep, diverse, and sometimes contradictory feelings. That in living, in dying, and in rising, Jesus modeled for me the saving way of dealing with my feelings. That He depended on others and on God to work through His emotions. That He acted upon His emotions in only constructive ways. I believe that the Holy Spirit is the spirit of knowledge, wisdom, and of feelings. that the Spirit of God wants to live within me and in my relationships, but that my uneasiness with my emotions repeatedly squelches him. That the gifts that he gives operate through my feelings as well as through my reason. I believe that the church is a people who are discovering their interdependence as they accept, report, and integrate their feelings as well as their actions. That it is necessary for me to be in this community where each one discovers who he is and what he must do in Christ's name. I believe that God, Father, Son, and Spirit is discovered in such a community and thrives there, giving hope for all the world. I thought that was very beautiful. The acceptance of all that I am as a tribute to God. And I don't have to be afraid. And please don't make me afraid. Tell me that you love me. You know, one time someone told me, I would love you even if you were evil. And someone told me that 10 years ago. And I still remember it. And I still feel a real glow. You would, wouldn't you? And I can feel so free to be accepted because this person has given me unconditional acceptance. So that you will help me a great deal to open up my emotions if you will accept me, whatever way I am. Okay? Will you sign a blank check that says I accept you and then let me fill in the amounts? Will you? Will you do that for me? Will you love me? This is the challenge of love. So, with regard to repression, that is burying emotions into the subconscious, you do that because of your programming. Test your piano, see if all the keys play. See what you can feel, because there's some you can't. There's some that you have repressed. Maybe if you're a woman, maybe you were told never be jealous. And you've never really admitted that you'd like to scratch somebody's eyes out. Or if you're a man, maybe you can't be afraid, or you can't be tender, or you can't cry, I don't know. Sound yourself out. But above all, don't label emotions good or bad. They're all a tribute to God, and I think that was very well expressed in that creed of human emotions. Now, how do you accept me? With all my feelings, how do you accept another person? There are ways called suppressive techniques that people employ on one another that say, I don't want to hear that. When psychiatrists in the age of the couch, you heard about the psychiatrist going down the street with a couch on his shoulder, another psychiatrist passes, what's the matter? He said, house call. In the age when psychiatrists used couches, they never let the patient see their faces. They sat around behind the patient. And obviously, when someone is pouring out his soul to you, you're going to yawn sometime, except when you're listening to me. Or your eyes are going to narrow. And people are constantly, especially when they're trying to open up delicate feelings, they're watching you to see if your eyes narrow, to see if you yawn, to see how you're going to react. And I urge you, when people open up emotions to you, and emotions that may not be pleasing to you, not to employ these suppressive techniques. When someone says, I want to talk to you, you say, about what? You've already shut them up. And it just amazes me in the counseling situation how this really works so effectively. The minute you look at a watch or a clock or yawn or your eyes narrow or you blink, people are watching. And we do that with one another in real life. I have a doctor friend, not that counseling isn't real life. I have a doctor friend who has a little retarded boy, and the doctor and I were sitting out in his backyard one night talking, and the little boy came out, and he had never seen me before. And he stood at a distance, he was watching, and the doctor was talking. And then he heard my voice. Now, I've always wanted to have a voice like Lloyd, but God didn't give it to me, I guess. But there was something in the voice that said, yeah, you can come. Because the minute I started talking, he jumped up into my lap. And the doctor said, did you see what he did? First he looked at you. Now he's retarded. He's not using his reason the way another 7 or 8-year-old boy would have. And then he listened. And something said, yeah, it's all right. You won't get hurt. You can come. And so I ask you to examine your use of suppressive techniques. I ask you to think about that when someone is trying to talk to you. Have you really signed that blank check and said you can be anything you want to be? You can feel anything you want to feel. It's really to God's glory that you feel. Have them all, from A to Z. It's all right. Very often, if a student comes and the emotion he would like to express to you is some kind of an aversion for you. So, that's a horse of a different color, huh? No, you can have an aversion for me. That's all right. You've just got a problem. But it's all right. It's all right. And people's emotions vary. I'm sure that within a marriage there are days when you really don't like that other person at all, that your well is dry. As one lady said, after 30 years of marriage, did you ever think about divorce? And she said, no. Murder, yes. Divorce, no. There are days like that, right? It's all right. You can have those emotions. I'd like to put a little warning about not mixing up judgments with emotions, but the emotion is fine. If I say, I feel ill at ease with you, it's not because there's something in you, it's because there's something in me. This is very hard to sell to people, that nobody else can cause an emotion in you. They can only stimulate the emotions that are in you. I think there are about two of us in the whole world who believe that. I can't cause an emotion in you. I can't make you angry unless there's already anger in you. And it'll only be when I hit an exposed nerve that you will get angry. Once upon a time, I analyzed handwriting as a little side gimmick, and I have a little game that I play of talking to 10 people in a discussion, no more than 10, and the discussion has to be serious. And I'll walk out of the room, and you all write a sentence, the same sentence. Hi diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, or something like that. And I'll come back in and I'll pass it back to the one who wrote it, because I've been watching you, and the same characteristics will show up in your handwriting. So I did this one night for a group of very pious ladies. This is a little local Catholic humor, but they're in a third order. That's right below a second order, whatever that means. But anyway, they're very pious ladies, all right? And I analyzed their handwriting and then when I brought them back in and I passed them back, I think I missed 2. You can't miss 1 when you do this. They said, oh, isn't that wonderful? What did you see in our handwriting? And now you're in trouble, right? When about 15 ladies all want to know what you saw. So I said, well, I tell you what, would you all settle for this? I'll tell you one thing I saw in each handwriting. And they settled for that. I said, I'm getting off lucky. So I finally came to one lady's, and I was trying to think of what I could say, because what I saw looked very bad. So I was trying to think, what could I say that would help her most? And I said, I think you should try to let out your emotions a little more. And she said, one must be discreet, you know. And I said, yes, I know. But you know what? I think it's almost more important to be open. Not that the two virtues are irreconcilable, but I think it's more important, to be open. And so we had a little back and forth. It was fairly pleasant. At least it wasn't hot and angry. And at the end of the evening, though, I thought, if she's as emotionally disturbed as I think she is, I might have hurt her. So I went to her and I said, did I bother you? Did I hurt your feelings? Did I embarrass you? She said, no. Oh, no, you have no idea how much you've helped us all. I said, thank you. So I went home, very peaceful, and then I got a phone call from one of the ladies, and she said, did you get her letter yet? And I said, did she write me? No, did she write you? The one that is scorched in your mailbox, that's from her. She called you every name in the book. I said, really? I'm going to go down right now. I'm 2 days behind with mail, but I'm going to get that letter. And I got it. Oh, beauty. I saved it. I have never been called more pejorative things in 2 pages of single-space typing. It was unbelievable. You know what I was a vile sadist, a bully, a manipulator, a show-off. But this was the kicker. You are the worst man I have ever met in or out of the clergy. Now think about it. That's a lot of men. In or out of the clergy, I was the worst. And I finished the 2 pages of single-space typing. You know what I felt? Ah, isn't that too bad? And it's not, how can you get help for a person like this? I'm pretty sure that I have alienated myself as all source of help. I wonder who could help her. That's all I thought about, really. The only emotion was compassion. Days later, I was saying Mass at our school, and the 2 girls who played the guitars at Mass came into the sacristy, and they were at advance guard of the women's liberation movement. I swore that someday, you know, priests wear vestments during Mass. I swore that someday I was going to come into the sacristy and they would both be vested and have a big sign for me, "Who needs you, baby?" At any rate, they were very nice girls. They were very generous. They were there every day to provide the music at Mass. They were a little pushy, but, you know, one day, while we were joking back and forth in our usual little banter, one of them said, "Do you know you come across to some people as a phony?" And all of a sudden, playtime was over. And I was determined to crucify both of them against the sacristy wall. I wouldn't blow my cool. I would do it with surgical precision. I would say, lift your chin a little higher, and when that jugular showed, I would slit it. I know just how to do it. The whole thing just opened itself in my mind to say, oh, really? Really? What does phony mean? And they would get serious now and say, oh, Father, we didn't mean that. We think you're a phony. No, I didn't say that. I only asked one simple question. See if you can get it through your little and so-called minds. I am asking you, what does phony mean? And they said, are you getting mad? I said, no, I'm not getting mad. They said, well, I guess phony means, and I knew what they were going to say. This is how surgically precise the crucifixion was. They said, I guess it means you don't practice what you preach. And I said, oh, yes, you're right. I plead guilty. I'm guilty of that. I don't. My ideals are too high for me at this moment. Are yours? Do you know anyone who doesn't? I wanted you to know me, for better or for worse, in my sickness and in my health. Anyway, I said, does anyone practice his ideals? I don't know of anybody who does. I certainly don't. And they said, well, yeah, and they're trying to get out. And that wasn't the end of the crucifixion. I mean, there's more and worse to come. I said, wait a minute now. Before you go, there's another meaning of phony. And that's someone who doesn't believe what he says, what he preaches. He may not practice what he preaches because he can't do it. Like St. Paul said, there's another law warring in my members. But he believes it. And in that second sense of phony, my dears, I plead innocent. I really believe in Jesus. I really believe in love. I really believe that's the only way to live. I can't practice that yet. But Jesus will be patient with me, and maybe someday I will. No, not now. You got to live with me until Jesus makes a saint out of me. Well, by that time, they were so contrite. You know, they had these hangdog looks. Why did I ever bring this up? And then I said, okay, fine. Ego te absolvo, now get out. Now, after you experience a strong emotion like that, you have two choices. You can displace the emotion and blame it on them. And what I suggest is you say something like this. These kids today, you give them your life. You pour out your life for them and they call you a phony right in the sacristy. Blame the other person. Say, you made me angry, you frightened me, you bore me. Always blame the other person. And if anyone asks you, what the hell do you ever do, then look dumb. But just say, you do it to me, you do it to me, you do that to me. Blame it on the other person. That's if you don't want to grow up. Now, if you want to be a growing person and you really want to buy what I'm selling, it's a little hard, I admit this. I don't know very many people who do buy it. Those girls didn't cause that emotion in me. That emotion was in me already, and they stimulated it. So I asked myself, I had dinner right after that Mass. It was in the afternoon Mass. I wouldn't go to dinner. I went up to my room and sat down, and I said, why did you get angry? What hurts in you so much that you would do and say things like that? What is it? Let it come up. You know what it was? If you're following me, I bet you do know what it was. I'm afraid I am a phony. And it really hurts me. And not a phony in the first sense, because I don't mind admitting that. I can admit that to anybody. I don't practice what I preach. I believe in the gospel, and I'm sorry, I'm just not able to love you as Jesus loved us. But that's what he said was his commandment, and I'm not able to do it yet. Maybe I never will. But you know where the nerve is really exposed, the neurotic center of that anger was, maybe I'm a phony in the second sense. Maybe I talk a much better game than I believe. Maybe I don't admit that I reside not only in faith, but in non-faith. Maybe I've never come clean, even to myself, about this. I always think after I give a particularly moving sermon, I get into the sacristy, I always ask myself, did you believe that? I mean, I don't mean to corner you now with an awkward question, but did you really believe what you just said? You said it very well. What makes me wonder is that I don't do more about it. I once read a book by a Lutheran pastor named Martin called Unless God Dies, and the man was, he's like Keith Miller. I just genuflect to his honesty. He told his congregation, I'm not sure if I really believe what I've been preaching to you for these years that I've been your pastor. I'm going to take a sabbatical and find out, but I've got to either pass or flunk this crisis of faith. And so all of a sudden, I am now in touch with something in me that incident of my rising anger made me face that I would have never faced unless I tried to trace that anger to its source. And not out there, not in two girls who accidentally let something slip that was not intended to be offensive, but what is in me? Why did I get angry? And so if you will do that with your emotions, you'll not only find bad things, by the way, in yourself, but very good things. Maybe you get angry when you see a bully picking on someone else, or you see injustice done. And what's in you is a very good and decent thing. But don't say the other person caused it. You know when that lady wrote me all those vile adjectives, and by the way, this is really interesting. I asked the lady on the phone who told me the letter was coming, how did you know about the letter? And she said she Xeroxed copies and sent them to everyone who knows you. And then a few days after that, my provincial, that's a little Catholic hierarchical structure, but my provincial called me up and said, John, I got a letter from a lady about you. And I said, is it Xerox? And he said, yes, it is. And I said, well, I know what letter that is. I got a copy, too. Don't feel too privileged, by the way. There are a lot of them in circulation. He said, I only have one question to ask you. She says what you are, what she thinks you are, but she never says what you did. Could I ask you that? What did you do? And I said, now you'll have to believe me. I analyzed her handwriting. She said, oh, my God. He said, I think we better let it drop. And I said, I think so, too. But what I want to tell you is that stirred no emotions except compassion in me
because I don't think I am a sadist or that I'm vile. I don't think I'm the worst man in or out of the clergy. In matter of fact, you know what I think? Get ready for this one. I think that if the whole world was modeled on me, it'd be a very nice place to live in. Really. I didn't expect that reaction, but thanks. I was bracing to say that to you. I was thinking people wouldn't have to lock their doors at night. They would be safe on the streets at night. I don't rob. I don't rape. And if you were hurt, the person passing would stop and help you, because that's what I would do. I am a pretty good person. But I know I'm not those things that the lady said. But you know what? I'm not sure I'm not a phony. Even as I stand before you, I'm not sure of that. So you call me a phony. You say, I don't know whether we can really accept you at face value. That would hurt. Not because you hurt me, because I hurt inside. Some years ago, a friend of mine said, oh, you know, you've got to make a retreat under Jean Vanier. Oh, Jean Vanier. He was an admiral in the British Navy. He was a Canadian. His father was Lieutenant Governor of Canada, and he was a saint. And one day, Jesus said to him in prayer, I want you to give up all this and go away into a hermitage until I call you out to do your life work. So he resigned his position in the Navy. He built a hutch in Spain. He lived in the hutch, and he prayed, and he fasted for 8 years. And finally, God said, you are now ready for your work. Your work is retarded adults. And I want you to preach my gospel. So Jean Vanier has founded, I don't know how many houses he has now for adult retarded people in France and in Canada. And he preaches retreats. And someone said, well, you see him. You know, everybody ought to know a saint just to see what God can do if someone really cooperates. You got to see this guy. So I drove up to Toronto from Chicago to make a retreat under Jean Vanier. And we're all sitting on wooden benches in this little chapel there. And out comes Jean Vanier. He's about 6'4". That's what a saint should be, you know. And he's slightly bent forward, and he's got sunken cheeks, you know, the gaunt look of a man that's been fasting for 8 years in a hutch in Spain. He's got the look. And his threads, you know, are real crummy. And he comes out and he looks at you and he gives you that big, warm smile that seems to come right out of the heart of God. And I say, wow. I don't know what you're going to say, fella, but you look the part. And he started talking. You know what the French mystique is? The Frenchmen, they have a way of speaking that's just really beautiful. But it's very exalted. So the first talk was on hungering for God. Hungering for God, you know, and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds very exalted to me, you know, to hunger for God, to really want God. And the man was saying it in a beautiful way. And I thought, when I left that first night, hey, am I glad I came. I think he is a saint. The third day of the 5-day retreat, I was mad as a wasp. The guy talked for an hour and 15 minutes 4 times a day, and we were sitting on wooden benches, and I started calling it the instant hemorrhoid retreat. And I said, the trouble with that creep is he's enamored of the sound of his own voice. And he doesn't realize the old German principle that the mind can only absorb what another part of the anatomy can endure. Now, by the way, nobody is more long-winded than I. Jean Vanier doesn't even hold a candle to me for length of wind. But anyway, I was getting real mad at him. And he's got a French accent, for which you can pardon person, I guess. But he's throwing in French words. He is. He's saying, and if you are faithful to Jesus, he will call you m'époux. Époux in French, as far as I know, means my spouse. He will call you that name, Boo. And I'm thinking, oh, gee, does a dictionary come with you, fella? And then he would say, oh, I am so sorry. It is a pity you do not all know French. Oh, get lost. Go play in the expressway. It's too bad you don't know English. I'm really mad, in other words, all right? I'm trying to verbalize it for you. So I go to my room the third night of the retreat, and I sock the pillow. That always helps, a little physical ventilation, you know? And then I say, what are you really mad about? So I lie down in my bed. And it was Vanier. No. Vanier can't make you mad. Nobody can make you mad. He can only stimulate an anger in you. What is it? Now, you probably know this if you know transactional analysis. A lot of times, anger clusters around another emotion. It hides another emotion you are repressing, right? A teacher who gets mad at his class, his anger may be fear that he can't control his class, or a sense of failure that he can't motivate his class, or something. But he covers over the real emotion with anger, all right? So I lie down in my bed and I say, why am I really angry? And out of my guts, instead of anger, comes a terrible sense of failure, of personal failure. And this will get you too. I said to myself, well, what am I failing at? And then it came very clear to me, I'm failing at the only thing I really want to succeed at. The only thing I really want to be in this life is God's man. That parable in the New Testament where Jesus talks about the man who builds the extra barns and plants the extra grain, and his little plan works out very fine, and he's sitting in the twilight watching his plan fulfilled, and he's thinking, now I own the poor. They will have to come to me in the next famine. And the angel of death comes and taps him on the shoulder and says, thou fool, tonight you die. That scares me. Because you and I are filling our barns right now with what? With praise, with honor, with reputation, with money. What are you filling your barns with? I don't want to fill my barns with anything except service and love. I really think it's the only sensible way to live. I don't want Jesus to put out his hands with those wounds, those gashes in his hands, and to welcome me into eternity and say, where are your wounds? And I don't want to say I don't have any. I really want to be a saint. I have enough Scotch blood. It's by absorption, but I have enough Scotch blood to think that anyone who doesn't spend his life becoming God's man is really stupid. And here this guy comes out, and all of a sudden I see about my resentment for Vanier. I really think he is what I wanted to become and didn't. And so I had to get mad at him because he was up there, a dedicated man. He showed us movies of these homes that he's founded working with retarded adults. And I watched those men weaving little baskets and putting together jewelry and things. And I thought, I don't know if I could do that. And he's loving them. He calls them my boys. And he knows what it is to hunger for God. And he knows what it is to give up everything. And I came from a poor family. He gave up riches for a hutch. He became what I wanted to be. I really want to be. It's the deepest desire in me, but I didn't. I got seduced by the desire for success, by 1,000 little things. I really feel like someone who made a holocaust of his life to God, and then after setting fire to the Holocaust, started combing through the pieces to find those which weren't burned. And, a compromiser. And I really feel badly about that. And so I say to myself, I wasn't mad at Vanier. I'm really mad at me. Because I didn't become that. So that I learned something about myself. Now, it's true that when you are repressing an emotion, it will have always a psychosomatic effect. I suppose the most common is tension or headaches. When you have a headache, you know there's some emotion you're not having. You're just not willing to have. And if you let it up, if you let it come up out of your gut where it can only be a knot or a pain or an ulcer, really let it come up and really have it, the psychosomatic effect, the somatic effect rather, will go away. The minute I faced what I was really struggling with in Toronto, I was in deep peace and in deep union with God, by the way, for the rest of that retreat. I was struggling against the light of seeing where I really hurt. And so what I want to be saying to you is that when you are sharing your emotions with people, you're not saying what they're doing to you. You can say, I don't feel loved, but what you're really sharing is something in you. Not something the other person caused in you, but something that was in you. All right? So that I think you have to buy that principle in order to become a real sharer of yourself. And that protects you, by the way, from making any judgments about people. If I say I'm lonely, it's not because you made me lonely. If I'm angry or some remark you made hurts me, it's not because you hurt me. The remark of the girls in the sacristy that some people think you're a phony, that hurt me. Why? Because I'm already hurting inside. Vanier hurt me because he showed me up. He made me realize what a failure I have been at the only thing I really want to succeed at. And that's me. And that's the only person that I can talk about, the only person that I can reveal. Me. And I've got to be utterly committed to honesty and to openness with you if you're going to love me. You may decide not to love me. You may go away. But if I did not commit myself to this kind of honesty and openness, you never could love me. If you ever said to me, I really love you, and I was holding all these things inside myself, I wouldn't believe you. I would sterilize, I would negatize every act of love you offered me, because I would always be thinking, you don't know me. If you only knew that I want to be a ladies' man, emotionally I do, that I demand adoring attention, because I'm not sure I'm a success and I want constant reassurance of that. If you knew that, and especially if you had to live with me, it's easy to get up here and say these things and people don't hate you, but what if you had to live with this? Someone that demanded adoring attention, constantly said, Achtung, I'm speaking. What if you had to live with that? Would you love me? So that there is a real problem, but if I don't tell you who I am, if I don't really open up, you can't love me, because you can't know me.
Well, but she said, for what? She's a thief. Oh, she said, no, not my husband. Yes, lady, your husband. He wouldn't steal anything. Well, he did. And the man said to his wife, honey, I've got a problem. I've never told you about it. I've never told anyone about it. I'll tell you when I get home. So he went to the police station, was released on bail, and he came home and he told his wife. Oh, my God. And she thought about it for about 3 days, and then she said, I can't live like this. I want a divorce. I just can't go on wondering if some night, every time the doorbell rings, it might be the police coming to get you in front of your little sons. So she asked him to give her a divorce. And at this point, she came to me, and I tried to explain the nature of a fetish and how at this moment he really needed her. He so feared rejection by a woman in the flesh that he picked out something symbolic. I sometimes think that men who drool over girly books are fetishists. And he really needs you. He needs you now more than anything to really accept him. And I don't know what you said in your marriage vows. Did you say, I take you in sickness and in health? Did you? Was that the commitment you made? Your husband is sick. He needs help, and he can be helped. But the one person who can help him most at this point in his life is you. Would you think about that? Just think about that. You've got to make your own decision. Please think about it. So she said she would try. And she walked out, and she tried for 3 months, and then she said no. She says, this is all. I've got to have a divorce. So they came back together. And except for the very private nature of this thing, I wish I could have a movie of this, because it illustrates everything I've been trying to say here tonight. They wouldn't look at each other when they entered my office. They reminded me of my good and decent parents. They walked about 4 feet apart from each other. And she said, I've got to have a divorce. And he said, and if she wants one, she can have one. I'm up to here with this. And I said, would you sit down? Would you just sit down now? Now, what I would like you to do for me is just tell me your feelings in this matter. Now, feelings are never judgmental. And I kind of explained the ground rules that I took today in that workshop. How you explain feelings to another person without judging him, without presuming any advantages over him, and without presuming that he caused those emotions. These are just my feelings. I can never tell you what you did to me. I can only tell you the way I reacted. I can't tell you what you said to me. I can only tell you what I heard. So we went through all the ground rules. And I said, now, would you start? What is your central emotion to the woman? What is the main emotion you have? And she said, insecurity, fear. I didn't expect it to be that. And I said, would you explain that to me? Would you describe that so vividly that I can feel with you what you're feeling? And she said, sure. She said, if he were running around with another woman, I wouldn't know how to compete. I would know what to do. How do you compete with a fetish? How do you compete when some demon has a ring in your husband's nose and owns a part of him that you will never own? I don't know what to do. And suddenly, after these years of marriage, there's a part of him that I not only don't possess, but I don't even know. I don't understand. It's so strange. I feel so distant and so insecure. And I don't know what to do. It's good. I said, no, I never thought of that, but yeah, I can really understand. Yes. Tell me another emotion. So we went down 15 different emotional reactions, all clustered around this one situation. And when I asked her, she didn't mention anger. I said, did you ever feel angry at him? That he's embarrassed you, he's hurt you, you'd like to hurt him back? And she said, no, I love him too much. I couldn't hurt him. And his eyes were like saucers. He didn't know this. He didn't know she loved him so much she couldn't hurt him. She never told him that. She only told him, I want a divorce. I can't live like this. She never told him how she really felt. Never told him about her insecurity, her fears, her compassion. Never. And he was kind of sitting there with saucered eyes and an open mouth. He never knew this woman. He didn't know this was her reaction. And then after a half an hour, I turned to him and I said, what is your main reaction? Oh, he said, shame. Shame, I'm so ashamed. You know, you've told me and other people have told me that fetish is not an uncommon thing, that other men have this, but I'm the only one I know that has it. And I sometimes feel like a leper. I really feel like it might be contagious. And there have been moments when I have my little boys in my lap and I take them and I put them out of my lap because a terrible anxiety comes into me that I might transmit this problem into them and they would have to go through the hell I have gone through. I'm so afraid of being contagious to my own children. And I'm so ashamed of being so different. I feel so alienated, like I'm here and the whole human race is out here. And then he went through, again, a whole gamut of emotions. And I encouraged him. I would draw him out to describe them so graphically that we could experience them with him. That's very important. That empathetic reaction is very important to love. To know and to gently accept the emotions of the other person. And then he's a big man. And he said, I feel real silly saying this. You know what I really want? I want someone to say, you can cry. Here, put your head on my shoulder. You can cry. That's how I feel. And his wife put her hand on his when he said that. And she held his hand then. And he went on to describe his feelings that had been churning inside of him that he had never told her. And finally, true, this is really true, they stood up and they embraced. And I went and I embraced them both. And we said an Our Father together. And we paused long, instinctively and long over that line. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And they kissed, and they thanked me, and they walked out. And like in the storybook, they've lived reasonably happy ever after. And I think that story really illustrates what I have wanted to say about what love is, and why it fails, and what we must do. And I hope that your sons and your daughters don't have to read through your old magazines. I hope you will tell them now. We give flowers to people when they can no longer smell them. We say nice things at their wakes. And sometimes we say, if he had been a loving man, when you were all the time. So I really encourage you, if you really want those you love, and you want the roots of love, the roots of that conviction and decision and commitment of love to pass from fragility into permanence, you've got to share yourself. There is no gift of love without the gift of self-disclosure, and especially at this gut emotional level. That's my message. However, this is other men call this the vest pocket. I call it the verse pocket because I always keep a little poem in there. One of the things that always bothers me at conventions when people are up giving speeches is the possibility of quackery. When you stand up here, you sort of assume that you are the repository of all knowledge, and you know you aren't. And you know you're struggling with the very problems yourself that you're telling other people how to solve. And so I would like to conclude with this poem of Rainer Maria Rilke. It's the last thing I would like to say to you. His poem, be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Do not seek the answers that cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. So live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answers. Thank you for listening.